And when it comes down to public health, we don't see that special attention in this budget. In fact, it seems to be turning a blind eye to it, Honorable Speaker. You know, it's quite unfortunate in that we seem to have these silos with the different health care.
And here I am at some old school, you know, Titans in the background, trying to promote school restoration, just like I was trying to promote school meal programs. And you know, sure enough, they got their $1.6 billion restoration plan for all these schools in BC over 15 years, you know. But I'll tell you, it was if you know, I was there before they showed up. So, you know, they know something's in the mix, but they just make it hard because they want to take credit where credit is not due. Okay? Sure, maybe they brought in that legislation and, you know, coughed up that money, but at the end of the day, connect the dots and see what schools got the most money. You know, what school districts got the most money. And if you're a rich district, you should be on the last of the list.
Into public health to make sure that people don't get to the hospitals for the right reasons, because they're healthy. Now,
they put poor people last on the list, so why don't we flip the script and put the rich people last on the list for a little while? You know, give the poor people a fair chance. You know, give them some breathing room. You know, give them some room to actually get out there and do something, you know? You might be surprised, but then you couldn't sit up in the house and take credit for that, though, could you? No, because it's all about social engineering. The more that we're depressed, the easier we are to control. And when we're not paying attention, that's what happens. The money gets shifted off, rob Peter to pay Paul. So we're going to give great point, you know, where Gordon Campbell fucking makes $500,000 a year. And you know what? He could take 1 year paycheck, donate it to his school, and there you go. Boom, done. But would he do that? No, because that's not his mission in life. His mission in life is to accumulate personal wealth for whatever perverse reason I'll never understand. And there's a lot of Gordon Campbells out there.
The selling of our assets. I mean, this is what the budget says, and I quote, our goal, and the minister spoke up on budget.
Is that what we elect these people to do, is to accumulate mass wealth for themselves? Because at the end of the day, that's the way it's starting to look like to me.
Does that sound familiar? You bet it does. BC Rail, an asset, was sold, lock, stock, and barrel, without proper compensation.
Right, and he wants to talk about taking the big freaking trucks off the road. Well, you should have thought about that before you fucking derailed the rail service.
Placed in for years for the people of British Columbia.
Only way you're going to transport goods is through a train.
Prices, I may add. And we're
outside of a truck container.
To be a little specific here and talk about what the minister had in mind. One of the examples the minister had was, quote, for example, the province owns a 15-acre site in Surrey, just off of Highway 10, unquote. That's
I know where that is.
The street, literally across the street from the minister's own constituency of Highway 10, where this new development is going to occur. And it is also located in the Ministry of Social Development, her ministries, in her constituency of Surrey.
That's where I went down to go see Rich Coleman and drive an hour to get there.
Right in the center of that constituency, set aside for future use for the people of British Columbia and her constituents. And if it isn't going to be used for health care, think of all the things it could be used for. In particular, for the minister's own Ministry of Social Development. And you know, you just have to now give a call to the financial assistance.
Did another one of those birdies leave the nest?
And what the government
I think I seen it fly. There it goes.
It's shut down the welfare office a few years ago in North Delta, and they moved it over to somewhere in Surrey with very poor transit service. And now we have a one-call center for not only Delta, Burnaby.
Kind of like the Landlords and Tenancy Act branch. If you miss 5 minutes, you're done. You're dismissed. Even when you take it to court over the phone, you still get it dismissed.
You try when you need financial assistance to get through that. 25
grand. You think you'd be going into a courthouse? You know, that's a serious claim. But it's all done on phone by a matter of what, half an hour, 45 minutes.
Constituency that can be used to help people. But that's not what this government's doing.
And the respondent didn't even show up, didn't even dial in, because they knew as a landlord that the thing was a joke.
We were holding on.
That's what you get for your phone call.
Surrey Memorial hospital needed it, unquote. Wrong, 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 Honorable Speaker. It was a reserve.
And now because the city, knows that it's under pressure to start doing about something with these crooked landlords, regardless of who they are, they're going to focus in on illegal suites and houses. So, they're walking in like on eggshells very tepidly, right? Because they know they're going to, it's going to create a lot of problems. Not only is it going to create with their voter base because people are going to get pissed off and not vote for them anymore. That's the first thing, right? Because, rules are going to change and they're going to have to document. And once you get the city going in there doing their electrical inspections and their plumbing and their structural, and, it's going to bankrupt a lot of people. And not only is it going to bankrupt a lot of people, but it's also going to push a lot of people out into the streets. And those people that are renting basement suites or just upper main floors of a house, are usually low-income people at the very low end of the rental market.
People of North Delta's fault or Surrey.
But that's their solution to solve the corruption that's going on in our communities right now when it comes to housing.
Has created the worst healthcare outcomes anywhere in Canada, right in the Fraser Health Authority, right in the North Delta Surrey area. It sits there because they've done nothing with it. It's a bunch of malarkey. Quote, so rather than letting it sit there, unquote. Now tell that to the patient waiting months and months for treatments. So rather than letting it sit there, tell that to the people with eating disorders who's waiting for years.
Well, and it goes back to that entitlement mentality where, even old people, rich or poor, it doesn't matter. You are part of the solution, just like poor people are part of the solution. Just like the kids are part of the solution. Just like the upper class is part of the solution. Everybody has to take their responsibility. So, poor people are like, at the age when they're starting to go back into infantile, right? When they start acting like babies and shit, right? And, they've been spoiled their whole life because they were born in a generation where, again, they accumulated the most wealth, they had the most access to jobs and opportunity and creativity, and laws weren't even made yet, and then you throw in institutional racism for some people, which excelled, the process and pushed it forward, and then education and just the ability to accumulate wealth. Well, that generation is extremely spoiled, and when you get spoiled children coming into the mix and don't want to do their fair share because they've been spoiled and pampered their whole life, kind of like the queen, and then all of a sudden you're asked to step up to the plate and do your fair share, just like the queen should be doing her fair share, which I personally don't think she is. And not only that, but she's 84 or something like that, so she's going back into being an infant, so that's going to make it like with her little tantrums. Children have tantrums. So you got a whole generation of old people having tantrums, demanding the best health care, the best this, the best. But at the end of the day, how much are they contributing back to the solution? Are they paying their fair share? Or are they just sitting there with their hand out saying, gimme, gimme, gimme? Because sometimes that's the way I see it. It's just, that whole structure of social engineering and what it's brought us to today. So, there you go.
But the BC Liberal government does.
These are the things I think about, right? How do you solve the problem? Well, poor parents have to pay for their kids, just like poor people have to pay for themselves, and not expect either group to look after the other because they should be looking after each other equally.
Which may exceed healthcare demands. It could be education, a training center.
Otherwise, we're going to be always held at the mercy of this, a debate in the House that at the end of the day, you, the viewer, is not going to have a choice in making a difference. You take it away from the House, and you bring it to your front door, and you implant it into your communities, and you spread it with goodwill, and you give it a chance to take root, and you invest into it because you can see the vision behind the concept of what you're participating in. And you nurture it along the way so that by the time it starts to come to fruition, you can sit back and you can say you made a difference. Throwing $2 into some bucket and then walking away and washing your hands of, okay, hold on, let me check the time.
The private sector use it to generate economic activity. Let's look at that one.
Okay.
What does that mean? I thought the former health
I'm kind of running them out here with this, but, I had a landlady. I moved into her house, within 8 weeks, I had to call social services because she was leaving her 8-year-old daughter alone. And I felt that was wrong. And by that time, the landlady had already started to display signs of mental unstableness. But I had no choice but to move and end up in this shanty. I call it my shanty shack, right? So I was in my shanty shack, and then all of a sudden, within the first month, 2 months, I inherited a little girl that lived with me basically for 3.5 years. While I kept, she slept with my children in the bedroom, and I looked after her for 3.5 years while her mother downstairs, who apparently had some form of schizophrenia or something, multiple problems, psychological problems, went about her day. And I remember one time, and this is what really stamped home for me poverty of the mind. She owned a half a duplex that looked like a shanty shack, was overrun by rats, which she liked to feed and treat as pets. Just one example of her mental illness. And obviously I was working on my nonprofit, right? It was a little different, though, because I was isolated. That's why I moved into an apartment, was to bring me into a gene pool of volunteers to be able to take the programs out. Because living isolated in a house or in a basement suite or even on the main floor of a duplex, you're still very much disconnected from the community, especially if there's, multiculturalism going on in there where some people don't even speak, the English language, and they're not interested in what you've got to do or say because they're too busy just trying to get on with their own lives. So anyway, she came to me one time and she threw $1 on my sewing table. And she told me to put that to my charity. And the air that she gave about herself was, one of, because she was the landlady. At the end of the day, she was the landlady. So, there was the rule. But when I went out to try and get help for her in her community, in terms of an Asian community, I couldn't find not a single person that would help that lady with her mental issues. So that $1, with her mindset in the way that she gave me $1 million, but yet going out into the community where there is $1 million to get her help was insignificant. So that's what I mean by poverty of the mind. Okay? I'll try and explain that some other time.
No wonder one member opposite last week offered his disdain for selling assets. Honorable Speaker. Madam Speaker, any fool can sell away his assets, but it takes a very smart person to build contingencies and save those assets for another day.
So would I be a fool to pack up my assets with the nonprofit and drop it off at Christy Clark's office? Here's the assets. You deal with it. Would I be a fool to toss that over there?
A small little paragraph in the budget means so much.
Well, when people have nervous breakdowns, and I've never had one, and I'd like to think I won't, but it runs in my family because my mother was an alcoholic, so she had nervous breakdowns, right? I've never had one, but sometimes I feel like I'm going to have one. But if I was to have a nervous breakdown, I think if it ends up in a box in front of Christy Clark's office, then that would be a sure sign of a nervous breakdown.
Formed the North Delta Public Hospital Society and later changed the name to the North Delta Newton Public Hospital Society under the Society's Act.
It's one thing doing something and getting ahead with it. It's another thing doing something and, just resulting in a nervous breakdown. So that's the comparison between the two, right?
Gary Harding. Ironically, Gary died at Surrey Memorial Hospital.